So, did you see my story about the tobacco arriving?
No, I did not see that.
So what happened was I ordered, remember I sent you that tobacco, the flavored one?
Yes.
Okay, before we say anything, guys, I know my audio is horrible. I actually have the best mic. It's a Yeti mic. I don't know why it's horrible. If somebody's an audio expert and can help me, I'd love to take your advice, but I genuinely don't know.
Why? What's wrong? What problem are you having?
People are complaining about the audio, and it does sound horrible. Look, I have the Yeti mic right here. It's right near my face. I've tried to bring it closer. I've tried everything I can. So if anyone knows, let me know. Anyway, the point is this tobacco. So remember I sent you that tin? And it's horrible compared to the other flavor, which is...
What's the difference? The taste?
The other flavor doesn't have like a whatever yours was, raspberry or cherry or whatever.
Right.
Just tobacco. It tastes so beautiful. And I had only one tin of that one, and I had one tin of a stronger one. So let me show you the stronger one. So this is Quit. This is like a high. I don't know if it shows. This is a high.
It's stronger than the other one?
Yeah, this is really strong originally. But then I've actually refilled it. So I ordered the one that I really like, which I finished really quickly. It's called SP Extra. I ordered 2 bags of it. They look like kilos of cocaine.
Jesus.
They came through the mail, and I guess Brad, the mailman, you don't know this joke, but someone stabbed through the whole package with like a knife to check if it was cocaine. He thought I was ordering cocaine from the Isle of Man. So anyway, a little bit of it fell out, but I ordered 2 packages, one for you and one for me. But now I'm scared to send it to you because the product. So I was like, twice, then why don't you just get it from? So I don't know. I think I'm going to send it to you, but they sent it really fast. It took a week. I was shocked.
Wow. Wow.
Back. You can
Did it fall out into the box?
No, actually very little fell out, but I'm just neurotic about it. I really love it.
I can't believe they stabbed it.
Yeah. But this thing is so good, Nick. If you thought the other one was good, you have no idea.
Really?
It's so
How do you go through it so fast?
Because I don't go through it that fast, but basically I started using it a little bit more throughout the day. I'm like catching.
I use it multiple times though.
Yeah. But what I do
is that bad?
No, I do it multiple. Now I'm basically doing it every hour or 2 hours throughout the day.
All right. That's basically what happens with me too, though.
Because it's fun.
Yeah.
The thing is, I need one of those spoons. So I looked online. There was like this necklace with like a snuff spoon, like a silver snuff spoon. I need one of those.
Yeah.
I found one that had a skull on it that was designed, and the website was open.
I think I have this website that I used to buy all my snorting tools from, like the Hoover vacuum, like gold straws and all that stuff. They make like all those little tchotchkes.
Really gold? Real gold?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what I want. Something like expensive, but a spoon. I wanted, because what I'm doing right now, I'll be honest with you, this is a little ridiculous.
They make the one with the keychain with the spoon that comes out.
Is the perfect size. Look, a nail clipper, the end of the nail clipper is the perfect size. So it's totally perfect. So I want to get this exact same size. I'm actually going to detach this now. I want to get this exact same size and put it on and make it like a silver one. Actually, I know a silver shop in LA that would probably make it for me. I
gotta find that site that I used to use.
Yeah, so I found this.
I had like a gold-plated Hoover vacuum that I used to bring to the club. It was like this big, and it was a little Hoover.
But you can't Hoover this stuff though. This is too.
Yeah, no, you'll fuck yourself up with that.
You're supposed to like
place it. Yeah.
This part in the human body is actually called the Snuff box. I think it's actually, if you look at a medical textbook, they'll sometimes call it the Snuff box because that's where they used to put snuff. And take it.
Oh, like do like that?
Yeah, they would put 2 dots.
Wow.
All the time.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. So, okay, hello, guests. So this was a weird discussion, but I think this is either week 13 or 14 or something like that. It's really week 12, but we did an earlier episode this week. So first of all, I want you guys to know that this episode is going to be very informative. I've prepared some extremely useful content for anyone using PEDs or bodybuilding, or in fact, really, even someone not bodybuilding. I'm going to explain some stuff to you about inflammation. We're going to talk about it later. First, we have to check in with Nick. So Nick is going to also talk to us a little bit about leg workouts and a little bit about synthol, because people are asking about synthol and asking what I think about how it works. And obviously, there's no research on this. And I can only theorize. I've never side injected in my entire life. Nick is probably Nick and Fakhri are the best people I know that know how to do this stuff. So Nick is an expert. So he's going to talk about that. Before we do, let's check in with you. How was your week?
Good. I'm, we have a project that's going on between me and you that we can't talk about yet. So I've been working on that and what was that?
We have to have a call.
Yeah, we do.
Being delayed, yeah.
And so I'm setting up the other office for that, for future stuff, paperwork, organizing a bunch of stuff. So that's been literally like consuming the shit out of me. A lot of fun though. Like I haven't been this excited. I told you I haven't been this excited about something in a while. So especially the fact that it's been in the works for a long time, and just the timing with everything is really weird, especially with you and I getting closer. And then obviously our mutual friend Shane, that's a piece in the pie. It's just really weird how it's just a lot to consume with the timing of people coming in out of your life. Like I've always had this happen to me and it continues to happen. And it's a very good thing, obviously, but it like almost freaks me out a little bit because I'm like, always like, why me? Like, why does this, like, is it everyone else's life like that too? Like, do things you don't normally fall into place like that? Like
not for me, I have tattooed on my wrist the number 13 in Arabic because I'm so unlucky. No, not for me, for you, Nick, because you're saying.
That's too funny, actually. Yeah, so I don't know. At nighttime, I go into like deep thought about it. Like I'm like, how is this working out so perfectly now? Where it's been more almost than 2 years probably that I've been trying to get this to work, and then finally all the puzzle pieces are there to like really make it work. I mean, like, you know, once we can explain everything, it'll make sense to people, but really take it off from the ground zero, like through, you know what I mean? Like skyrocket. So
yeah, without talking about what it is, let's say how cool it is. Cause the other partner was a client of mine and a client of yours. And not only that, he's a great man, very intelligent, very capable, a family man, you know, like Nick is going to become, and I am becoming as well, and a moral person. And Nick, by the way, guys, people don't realize now I talk to Nick more than I think any male in the world. Because I don't know any, I basically talk to you, after Lucy, I talk to you the most. So I talk to Nick like probably every hour throughout the day through texting or something like that. Not about work or business or anything like that. Sometimes it's personal stuff.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, and I got to tell you guys, like, we posted a video today and people noticed what happened in the video. So I just want to say something.
Did they?
They did notice. Everyone commented on their own, yeah. But the point
I gotta look.
The point is this, guys, look how much of a saint Nick is. That after that interview, I blew up because you know what happened to me? Guys, my sleep has been so messed up because of something I'm going to talk to you guys about later in this podcast. By the way, this podcast is going to be so informative. So for you guys that are thinking we're all about drama, you're going to gain a lot of information here that you can't get anywhere else in this podcast. So it's going to be a bit long, I think. Sorry, Nick. But
don't be sorry.
But the point is, Nick is so what happened to me that day? So my HPA system is very overactive naturally, but I don't like to take propranolol or beta blockers at night because then I get nightmares. Right. And what's been happening to me is although I disguise it, I'm actually an introvert. You know, not in person. You wouldn't notice that I was an introvert in person. I look like an extrovert. I act like one, but really I'm an introvert. Introvert means I get my energy from inside, not from outside. Nick is the opposite. I think you're an extrovert naturally, right?
100%.
Yeah. So for me, whenever I do a podcast, it drains me so much more than doing a day of research. So what's been happening to me is I do podcasts with Nick in the morning, and then sometimes the Delray Misfit guys, they only do podcasts at night. So I have to talk to them at night, and then I can't sleep, and because I'm just up because I just talk to people. So that night before the interview, I couldn't sleep, and the interview had to be at 8:30 a.m. California time. So I was like. And I thought, you know, this is Nick's friend. So I was like, I wanted to be very respectful. So I was really concerned that if I sleep after the podcast, I won't have time to research him. I didn't know anything about him. So I was like, damn, what should I do? So I laid in bed. It was 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep still. So I said, I didn't want to take GABA stuff or anything like that. So I'm very careful about that. There's one sleep medication that I like, which Nick, I should tell you about also privately, because it's very, very, very useful. But anyway, the point is, I didn't want to take that because that would dull my brain the next day. So I was like, what should I do? 3 a.m. I was like, damn it, I'm just going to get up. So I got up, took SR 9009. Didn't really work. At 6 a.m, I was dying. I was so tired. So I get into this podcast, and then this guy appears, and I was so tired I could barely like talk. When he was originally trying to interview me, I was like, oh, I can't, like I could barely talk. But immediately I got so annoyed that I woke up completely. And then I was like completely awake. After the call, the guy finally left the call, which is after the call. I was like, Nick, what did you do to me? How would you do this to me? Why did you bring this guy on? And Nick, listen to this, guys. Look at this guy, huh? And if any of you watch that interview with that guy, you'll realize this guy is one of the most unlikable characters you'll ever meet in your life. But Nick sits there, tells me, no, deep inside, he's a really good guy. He was my roommate for a year. I know him very well. I had experiences with him. He's a good guy. He's just coming off that way. He's not like that. Yeah. And he's not saying this for any reason. I mean, there's no benefit. Behind the guy's back, Nick is sitting there saying, no, I promise. Deep inside, he's a good guy. Yeah. That's the kind of guy Nick is. And I also discovered this through talking to your fiance too. It was telling me that Nick is a very trusting person. You know, it's actually the opposite. Usually people use Nick, not the opposite. Nick always thinks well of people. So I just wanted to show more and some more, you know.
I appreciate that.
He really is. And my wife loves Nick. She always says, this guy is a heart of gold. So, and
it's funny too, because even after the attack, remember he texted me the next day and said that he's like, your friend's a nice guy, but.
But the thing he said about but was, I don't know if we can say it, but it was so evil. I mean, the word he used, Nick didn't understand what it meant exactly. It's not destiny. He said, I see his fate. Fate is your end, by the way. Fate is death. So this guy became, who's that guy? If anyone's watching the show, comment on, there's this guy who recently did a lot of psychedelics and then he thought he's God and he's been fasting for 40 days. I don't know. Do you know?
Oh, the kid? Yeah,
the kid. So basically he became like the kid. They were comparing him to the kid, but when the fate thing came out, I was like, what did he think? He really thinks he's God?
Yeah, because I didn't ask him for his feedback either. We never even I thanked him for coming on.
He said feedback. You're a nice guy, but you should talk more. This guy, I see his fate. I was, he's Nostradamus. He saw my end. I didn't know he knew me. The funny thing is, I've sat with Nobel Prize winners. Daniel Kahneman used to be my advisor's advisor. I've sat with rulers, the ruler of UAE, the ruler of Dubai. I've sat with ministers. I've sat with billionaires, 5 billion, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion. No joke. Nobody has, and I've talked to them. And nobody has ever told me my time is precious. I've never heard that in life. But you know what? I realized after when he was talking, I realized this guy, if he knew who I had contacts with, he wouldn't be talking like that. He would have sucked up. I know exactly what he would do. But anyway, that doesn't matter. It's not about bad luck.
It was funny. It was funny though.
Look how Saint Nick is. He sat there and he defended him. And I was like, damn, man, this guy really just sees the good in people. It's incredible.
We have a lot of history together, and we had our, listen, I'm not telling you everything we did was perfect together. We got in a lot of fights, trust me.
Unavoidable.
But at the end of the day, he would come back and be like, sorry, I own that one. You know, I was wrong, but you know, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like he did own it when we came out of a relationship. We had a friendship. We were around each other all the time. You know, he would come stay with me in California when he did move out for shows, and I would help him and whatnot. And we actually, honest to God, when his guard's down and like once he's your friend, he's like one of the best guys to hang out with, which is really weird. But like, and I don't know if you noticed like how his guard went down after, even when the camera was off, like he was a little bit more.
Yeah, for the audience was saying he never smiled. He smiled once the camera went off. Yeah.
As soon as the camera was off, he was like a much different person. He was more relaxed, you know, and maybe he has like a fear of camera. I don't know. Maybe he's camera shy. I don't know. But like there's so many things I learned from once I became friends with him about him that I can like easily see through now, I guess you could say. Like he's never hurt me. So I can't be like, oh, he did X, Y, Z to me, because that never happened either. So yes, he's arrogant, but like I've been so used to that growing up in fucking New Jersey and New York with arrogant people that I just like, I'm like, oh, I can see through that shit, you know, like, you know, so it's a little different.
I found my cousin in New Jersey. I'm going to send you the Instagram.
Oh, you got to show me. So funny.
So I was going to add something, to be honest, guys, like I'm not judging him. When I was like 14 years old, I was a lot like that. I was not cerebrally insecure. So I met people like that only once, honestly, not at Carnegie Mellon. At Carnegie Mellon, like, for example, there was one math course in which there were many, especially in math courses, this happens. You have like 2 or 3 top guys, and I was always one of them, like we're scoring 97, 99, 98, and we're competing, but everybody was nice. When I went to the London School of Economics, it was very different. I went into one philosophy. I met many arrogant people there. I don't know why. They're like well-bred. You know, the London School of Economics is the most presidents and world leaders graduated from of any university.
That's wild.
All the Kennedys went there for their master's degree. That's one of the.
Yeah, I know the Kennedys went there. That's the only reason I know it.
So there was.
Well, I knew talking about it too.
Yeah, so I went to this philosophy class, and there was like the most. I mean, they were weird. They were all competing and insecure about their intelligence, and they're all competing. It was a logic course in the philosophy department. It was like a very rigorous course, and I saw those kind of people, but I've never met them before. And then I met him, but. When I was 14, I was insecure in the same kind of way. And I was arrogant because I was trying to build up something that wasn't inside. And I used to probably annoy a lot of people. There used to be friends like you who saw through me and knew the real me. But I wasn't like that in terms of mentality. I was more like that in terms of like dominance. Like I would be very aggressive around everyone.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's it. I don't want to talk about him anymore.
Yeah. He's his friend. He's a good guy. I mean, Nick, and probably deep inside his heart, he's a good guy too. So let's move on. So the first thing I was thinking is, just so nobody thinks that this is a gossip podcast, let's start with the information. So I'm going to start with I want to tell you guys a little bit about inflammation and how you can control it in bodybuilding and how it is one of the most important things for you to watch out for. Yeah. Now, before I say anything else, unlike the guy we were just talking about, I want to say I didn't invent anything here. Everything that I came across that I'm about to talk to you about is from academic papers. I just read a lot of papers and over time came to an idea of various things from genetics, from lifestyle, from things like that. And also from my own experiences, being a weightlifter, being someone who's naturally hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal dominant, meaning glucocorticoid dominant, meaning also adrenaline, cortisol. I'm a person that naturally gets in that stress response. So is my whole family, by the way. So my grandfather died of like a stroke. He probably had a lot of plaque. He was extremely angry person. I mean, like unbelievable. My father is an extremely angry person. Most of my uncles are like, some degree of it. So it's in my family. And so basically I've seen this happen in life. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about it. And also I got Crohn's disease, right? So I got Crohn's disease and I suffered a lot from it and I tried to understand it. So that's where I came up with all of this stuff. And I basically gathered the information together. I'm not the reason that this information exists, but I am the first person to introduce it in bodybuilding. So there are people, very few people in bodybuilding who have been monitoring in their blood markers, something called C-reactive protein. You can also monitor something called fibrinogen. These two biomarkers are proxies. Proxy means something that you can track to track something else in statistics. They are proxies for inflammation, systemic inflammation across the body. What is inflammation? Inflammation happens when it could be in a couple of scenarios. In fact, I'll mention a couple of them. But by the way, I have a lot of notes. See, I've made proper notes for this discussion so that I can take you guys logically through it. So this will be slightly boring, but very informative. Okay. And for you guys to know, like, I know Nick probably won't talk that much for a little bit, and I'm sorry about that, but interrupt me if you ever have anything to say, please.
Always will.
So first of all, how inflammation begins is basically this. You have some kind of irritation in your body. Now, it could be, let me give you an example, allergies. So for example, some people, there's something about cats or dogs that their body senses as a threat. So your body sends out your immune system. Your immune system has something called inflammatory cytokines. They are things called the interleukins. The interleukins go through 1 through 13 and more. In fact, interestingly, for example, interleukin 10 is actually anti-inflammatory, but interleukin 3, interleukin 1b particularly, tumor necrosis factor alpha, these are the inflammatory cytokines sent out by your immune system to deal with things that are attacking your body. It's called the host defense system in your body. So what happens is, for example, this cat can, or for example, food, you could be allergic to some kind of food. Your body senses that, sends inflammatory cytokines to it. But mainly, we don't want to talk about allergies and stuff like that. We want to talk about something called oxidative or nitrative stress. So oxidative stress happens when you have free radicals in your body that are attacking your body's cells. Your body senses this, and it sends out these inflammatory cytokines to defend against this attack. So basically, that's what's going on. So you have oxidative stress, and then you have an inflammatory response. The problem is that when you have this inflammatory response for a very long time period, even if your immune system is not malfunctioning, even if it's functioning fine, but for example, you're smoking cigarettes every day for 20 years. What happens when you smoke cigarettes? How does cigarettes increase plaque in the body? It does it because cigarettes have a lot of kind of carcinogens, but one of them are, for example, nitrosamines, which you're smoking, or polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which you're inhaling. And when you do that, your body's immune system gets overactive, okay? This also happens, for example, when you take steroids, which I'll get into in a little bit. I just want to go through my list accurately. So when this happens, for example, you're smoking, you get this oxidative stress, your body sends out inflammatory cytokines. And what happens is the LDL, low density lipoprotein particles in your blood because of the inflammatory response, get lodged into your arterial walls. And that's one of the ways you develop plaque. You may not have a high LDL, but you may have a high C-reactive protein. And that means you're inflammatory. And by the way, guys, I didn't write this in my notes, but if you want to measure this, what I do with my clients and myself is I check C-reactive protein and fibrinogen regularly. But for someone with a serious condition, you can go to Quest Diagnostics and you'll find an inflammatory profile where you can actually check out tumor necrosis factor alpha, IL-1 beta, IL-2 beta. You can check out all of the interleukins and you can see their measurements according to the population averages. So you can get into details. Now, the next step I want to tell you is some examples of what happens when there's dysfunction. So, what I was saying is, so you could smoke every day and you could keep getting these inflammatory cytokines damaging your body and you might not have dysfunction. Or you may have genetic predispositions or various things, or just because you have it for a very long time, these oxidative stress markers, over time, your immune system could get dysfunctional. And this is where the problems arise in bodybuilding, so especially. So I want to talk about some examples. The first one for you guys to think about is GI diseases, gastrointestinal diseases. So I have Crohn's disease, which is the most major GI disease. That means...
Real quick, does smoking weed participate in that category?
Yeah, smoking weed produces polyaromatic hydrocarbons and carcinogens also. I used to be a heavy smoker of both weed, marijuana, and cigarettes. And I'll tell you one thing, marijuana clogs up the lungs more than cigarettes. You could feel it. You can feel it. And also, interestingly, if you smoke marijuana, right after you smoke it and you smoke a cigarette, the cigarette I think the lungs actually open up a little bit more and absorb the cigarettes more. But anyway, you can get carcinogens from that as well. But people usually don't smoke weed all day. I mean, I used to, but people usually don't.
A lot of bodybuilders do.
Yeah, I used to smoke I used to prepare my joints like in a cigarette pack. There would be 20 joints every day. I used to have my girlfriends do it, so it would be prepared. Every morning I would train them to roll very well, and I would exercise if they're not rolling well.
Yep.
Anyway, and now they have pre-rolls. We didn't have those.
Pre-rolls, I know. No, you had pre-rolls back then.
I had pre-rolls. I would save me a lot of time.
Forget about it. Yeah, forget about it.
Actually, it would have been worse. Yeah. So what are GI diseases? GI diseases are there's Crohn's disease, colitis, a lesser version, inflammatory bowel disease. Colitis means it's stuck on your colon. Your colon is being attacked. Crohn's disease means your whole GI system is being attacked. And it can be in a specific area also. So you can have Crohn's disease in one part of your GI tract. What are these diseases? This is what happens, usually. Basically, what happens is you either have dysfunctional bacteria in your microbiome and you're not feeding them right, which means they don't have fiber. What happens is these bacteria attack the mucus. So your intestines have a mucus layer in the inside, okay? The bacteria attack this mucus layer because they're trying to eat literally your intestines. So they end up getting towards your intestines. They don't actually usually get through your intestines. But once your body senses that, it sends these inflammatory cytokines to your intestines. And what ends up happening is your body starts attacking the intestines from the outside. So the intestines get inflammation in them. And over time, this inflammation starts causing serious pain. In Crohn's disease, you get really a lot of pain. Now, for example, in Crohn's disease, C-reactive protein is elevated in over 95%, I think, of people. 95%. So you can just check your C-reactive protein. If it's elevated, you might have Crohn's disease. In colitis, because it's a smaller area, so colitis means your colon is having a problem. The bacteria in your colon are causing an issue, not the other parts. It's specialized. That's what John Meadows had. So, and not just John Meadows, but there's I think it's not Tom Prince, but a really big bodybuilder back in the day removed his colon from the 90's. You know what I'm talking about? He's huge.
Still alive?
Yeah, huge, very strong guy, huge European guy. He lives in the US. I think he removed his colon. Anyway, the point is, Francois removed his colon, right?
Oh, Francois, really?
I
didn't
think
know
so.
that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it. But the point is, a lot of bodybuilders have removed their colons. This is not talked about. Nobody knows why it's happening, and I'm about to explain to you guys how to avoid it. It happens a lot in bodybuilding. A lot of them have even colostomy bags, like Mandis, this guy we're going to talk about in a future episode. Mandis has a colostomy bag. He told me yesterday on the phone it's from diverticulitis, but it could happen from Crohn's. It could happen. What does that mean? That means that your inflammatory cytokines attacked your GI tract so much that you can't handle it. You're not managing this. Your C-reactive protein is like 11, like mine used to be, or 30. It's below 0.3.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and by the way, you have to get a high sensitivity one. Below 1.0 is not, even if you have 0.8, it's not good. You should have below 0.3. So what happens is these guys did not know what was going on. They were probably, every time they go to the bathroom, it was diarrhea. They didn't pay attention to it. They didn't care because they're tough guys, right? So they just go through it. And they get to a point where these inflammatory cytokines have damaged their GI tract so much that they have to amputate it. They have to cut it off. It's exactly like, for example, a guy getting diabetes, having high glucose in his blood, never using insulin. This happens a lot among African Americans, unfortunately. Yeah. Never using insulin, getting glaucoma, or getting, for example, having to cut off his leg, like one of the bodybuilders had to do recently. He said because of blood clot, but what happens with that often? It could be a blood clot. It could be related to diabetes. So if you don't control that stuff, you might have to amputate a part of your body. So I could have had to amputate my whole GI tract or part of it and have a colostomy bag.
Why the leg? Why is it always the leg?
The end of the body. The glucose gets stuck at the ends. So your hands, your feet. So I have an ancestor, not an ancestor.
So any extremity.
Yeah, that's why they can't get hard. Diabetics often. God. Yeah, they have to put in sometimes a machine inside because the blood flow is not good because you have such thick glucose in your blood. You're not using your insulin right and managing it. Now we could talk about diabetes for a whole other episode. There's Forget about it, yeah. But the point is, I wanted to compare it to amputating a part of your body. If that happens, you have failed. You have failed. You have failed. You could have avoided this. I'll tell you how.
I mean, look at Flex Wheeler. It's horrible.
Well, in his case, diabetes, but I'm talking about the GI tract because I'm telling you, you have failed. I've controlled mine. You can control yours too. All right. So we move on. The next thing. Oh, let me give you another example that's very common. Psoriasis. So psoriasis. What's psoriasis? I get psoriasis often. And famously, Kim Kardashian, my wife tells me, has psoriasis.
Yeah, so, she does.
You know that too? Everyone knows.
I have eczema, so.
Eczema. That's another example. Eczema. My father has eczema, for example. That's the same thing, autoimmune disorder. So, psoriasis, by the way, let me give you an example, an interesting one about psoriasis. You'll often find people with psoriasis will get flaky skin in their beard and in their hair, but not as much here. Why? The reason is because when you have hair, you get more bacteria living around that area. And so your body is sensing that bacteria and attacking it from the inside. And that's why the skin is falling out. It's getting rid of it. It's trying to get rid of it, right?
Kim Kardashian's is really bad.
It's surprising because she doesn't have any, that means that woman is living a very unhealthy lifestyle. Very, very unhealthy. Because usually it'll happen to people like us. It'll happen in our beard and our hair. It's not going to happen on random parts of your skin. How do you know?
Her legs are covered in it.
It's like just red because she removes the skin, I guess.
I remember seeing, I'll send you the episode that she did on it. It's everywhere on her body, like literally everywhere, like her entire body.
The skin or the skin flaking, or she just shows the redness?
Both.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's nasty. Yeah, the skin looks really bad when it happens. Honestly, I've had to shave my beard. I remember the most stressful time of my life. I won't get into details where it was, but I used to have long hair just like here. And that psoriasis was there bothering me. I couldn't get a proper haircut and it was killing me. So I just shaved my head. I was so pissed off. I was shaving my head trying to get the skin off it because I was so stressed. My C-reactive protein must have been 30. So as you guys can see, this is an interesting subject, right? So another example, arthritis, right? A lot of bodybuilders have to get joint replacements. And is that because there is a misalignment in their joint and they're maybe doing an exercise wrong? Possibly. There is stress there, of course, but it's also maybe an upregulation of these inflammatory cytokines. In true arthritis, the inflammatory cytokines attack your joint and they start to basically they start to destroy your collagen and the structure of your joint. So for example, whenever I get a cold, which is very rare, or when I got COVID, how did I know I had COVID? My shoulders started hurting. I knew immediately. Okay, so in my case, because I used to arm wrestle and I used to be really obsessed with my delts back in the day. And I'm going to do an episode on delt stuff one day because I had a cool exercise. But anyway, the point is I used to do that a lot. And so arthritis is the same thing. Your inflammatory cytokines are attacking that area. Like, for example, my close friend, Roger Stone, unfortunately, his wife has one of the worst cases of arthritis. And she suffers in pain all day, you know, and what she's been doing is like different kinds of things like IV stem cells to spread new cells throughout her body. But anyway, we'll move on. The next one example I'll give you is atherosclerosis, what Dallas McCarver had. Now, atherosclerosis, which is plaque buildup throughout your arteries and your blood vessels. As I said before, you could have a high LDL and no inflammation, and eventually those things just get lodged in there. But if your inflammation is very high, you could have a low LDL and you could develop plaque really quickly, right? So whenever you measure your LDL as a bodybuilder, measure your C-reactive protein, compare them because they're important. Another example is anxiety and depression. So one of the core 3 principles of my cognitive enhancement program from myself and others, and my book will come out one day, is neuroinflammation. There's inflammation in the nervous system. Inflammatory cytokines are released also by something called microglia in the nervous system. And if you take one of the inflammatory cytokines I just mentioned, tumor necrosis factor alpha, if you take it and inject it in a rodent, the rodent will act anxious immediately. Any mammal will. If you have a higher inflammatory state, you will start to become anxious. One of the reasons that trenbolone makes people anxious. And we'll get into that later. So and another final one I want to give from Chris Bumstead. So kidneys. So for example, you may have some oxidative stress in your body, and it happens to be at your kidneys. And by the way, let me explain something to you guys. In terms of your kidneys, there's only 2 ways you can protect it. And people always ask all the time about it. They ask about like astragalus, but the point is, they ask about that. So there's 2 ways you can protect your kidneys. One way is by lowering your blood pressure, and one way is by lowering oxidative stress. All the supplements that protect your kidneys are lowering oxidative stress. And we'll talk about how they do that in a second. So probably Chris Bumstead has a program from Ian that deals with this oxidative stress to protect his kidneys. Because in his case, we all have different bodies, right? Mine might attack my GI tract. Nick, who's falling asleep because he had a late night last night, probably could be attacking his joints.
Oh no, I'm fine.
Like in the Chad Nichols interview.
No, I'm good.
They're gonna comment. That's what I want to say. So anyway, next we'll talk about genetics. So number 1, look at this example I'll give you, which I think was the case with Dallas. There's a variant that's very famous and it's very dangerous. It's called the ApoE4 variant. Everyone has 2 copies. Okay, every human. Now, Nick, I want to see your 23andMe. We'll find out what you have. But I have ApoE3 and ApoE3. I have clients. One of our mutual friends actually also has one ApoE4 variant. When you have so just so you guys know, ApoE4, I'm not going to get too much into the details of the science, but ApoE4, ApoE3, and ApoE2, you can have one of those, and you have 2 copies. You get one from each parent, right? You're either lucky or unlucky. ApoE4 is the ancestral variant. That means that it originated about 200,000 years ago. Original humans in Africa had the ApoE4 variant. Later, about, I think, 140,000 or 90,000, I can't remember now, but the ApoE3 variant came out. Then the most recent one, which is either 70 or 90,000 years ago, the ApoE2 variant came out. The ApoE2 variant makes you the least likely to develop atherosclerosis. The ApoE3 variant is the normal one, most common among people today. The ApoE4 variant makes you far more likely to develop plaque. If you have 2 copies of the ApoE4 variant and you're not using a statin all the time and watching your LDL, probably even if you're doing that, you should just quit bodybuilding. You should just quit. You should, if you see 2 ApoE4 variants, just quit. Okay, you're going to kill yourself very quickly. So I think that may have been the case with Dallas. Now, why I give this example is that when you have an ApoE4 variant, what happens is this. Why was the ApoE4 variant our ancestral one? Because originally we didn't cook. So we used to probably eat raw meat. And when you eat raw meat or you're in a very dangerous environment, there's a lot of bacteria attacking you. The ApoE4 variant makes you in a REL-A dominant state, which means that your body is in a defense mode all the time against bacteria. If you have an ApoE4 variant and you're living like Lenny does, where sometimes you lick the floor in a gym, or Lenny does this kind of funny stuff to improve his immune system, you'll be better off. You won't get sick very often if you have ApoE4 variant.
Does he really do that?
Yeah. So if you'll be better off, or drinking piss from trannies, which he also does. So you'll be better off. There'll be bacteria in that, and I'm not insulting Lenny. I love Lenny, but I'm saying.
Oh, I know. I didn't know.
Yeah, we love Lenny. So, but if you, I mean, genuinely, he's like a close friend. So, but the point is, if you have an ApoE4 variant, I'm just trying to make it interesting because it's scientific and boring, you know. If you have an ApoE4 variant, you're more defensive. You'll be better off, but you're probably going to die younger, because this thing is causing problems in your body. So I just want to mention some examples of genetic reasons why you may be predisposed. So another example, you may have polymorphisms in your inflammatory system, specifically in, for example, tumor necrosis factor alpha. There are SNPs that are significant genome-wide in tumor necrosis factor alpha that will make you more likely, for example, to get cancer. Because why? Tumor necrosis factor alpha is also your host defense system against cancers. So this is another interesting thing, huh? If you have a dysfunctional immune system, you're more likely to get cancers. But if you have a properly functional immune system, you're less likely to get cancers. But if you inhibit your immune system, or you have a weak one, you're more likely to get cancers too. So it's interesting. And you could have, for example, polymorphisms in the exact area where you might get the disease. So for example, Chris Bumstead may have polymorphisms in his kidneys, something to do with his kidney, how it's formed. You may have it in your LDL receptor. So you end up with more LDL cholesterol particles in your blood. You know, you may have it, for example, like me, you may have Crohn's disease related ones. You may have it arthritis related ones that have something to do with collagen even, for example. So it could be all kinds of genetic predispositions. Now, even if you don't have those genetic predispositions, you're still going to be more likely when you're bodybuilding, when you're on steroids and all this kind of stuff, to have immune system dysfunction. Because it's common in bodybuilding. Everyone knows people don't get sick, right? It's rare to get sick on steroids. It's much more rare, right?
Yeah.
Don't you know?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, maybe you didn't know on them for a long time, but like if people who are natural get on a cycle and stay on for a year, they usually don't get sick that year because their immune system is overactive the whole year. So this is what I really want to get into next.
So that's a big topic all the time. People are always like, is my immune system weaker or stronger when I'm on steroids?
It's stronger. It's more active until you mess it up and you end up with like colitis.
Well, an imbalance of whatever.
But when you first take it, it upregulates all of that.
Right.
So
what happens if somebody's continually cycling though?
Yeah, no, it's for me at least for 3 years it stayed high. I never got sick. When you use the word
steroids, you mean anabolics and androgens, or you mean just testosterone?
No, all of them, especially like trenbolone. Trenbolone will make it. But if you're on them for 15 years, it may downregulate. Your body should downregulate. It should react to it. It should. But if it doesn't, you're going to end up with a colon removed, or with arthritis, or with your shoulders replaced, like many people have, or with these kind of things, right? If it doesn't, and that depends on your genetics. You know, it should downregulate.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the causal factors in terms of lifestyle. So this is where it gets interesting. Number one, sympathetic nervous drive, what our friend from the other day talked about, which you didn't want to name it, but our audience is very intelligent. So your your nervous system that you're not consciously aware of has two states. It has a sympathetic nervous drive and a parasympathetic nervous drive. The sympathetic one is powered by adrenaline and cortisol. When you get stressed, that goes on. When you take trenbolone, that goes on.
Fight or flight or no?
Yes, exactly. It's called the fight or flight response system. That's what it's called. And the parasympathetic is called the feed and breed, or rest and digest.
Oh, I didn't know that one. Okay.
Yeah. So when you see a tiger, you go into the sympathetic. When you're on something that when you're on something that strongly agonizes the androgen receptors, your body naturally gets in this kind of high sympathetic nervous drive. So it's like the REL-A state that comes from ApoE4. So androgenic signaling does this on its own. So the more androgenic the things you're taking are, like trenbolone, like very high dose testosterone, like high halotestin, like anadrol, you're going to get more of this inflammation, okay? And when you're using something like primobolan or equipoise, which unfortunately thickens your blood, both of them do, by the way. But when you use those things, you get less of that inflammatory response, which is why I believe that bodybuilders on the off season should not be using the very androgenic compounds at a high dose, because you don't grow. You won't sleep well. Your body won't recover well. Do you agree, Nick?
I've always agreed with that, 100%.
So what
I never touched anything that was.
What is your recommendation? Like, what is your go-to?
My off season was always like the most basic principles: testosterone, DECA, testosterone, growth hormone, little bits of it, not high amounts of it. I honestly, my off seasons were the least amount of drugs that I use. I would use more insulin then, cycle insulin. Obviously, I wouldn't stay on it for long, 2-3 weeks at a time. I would literally just focus on resting as much, training as least as possible. Resting recovery was key off season, and eating, pulling back on the frequency of how much I was in the gym. And obviously the same with the drugs. I would never touch a Trenbolone. I would never touch Equipoise, never Primobolan, all that stuff during my off season. If I did, it was very short bursts of things. If I was trying to push through something, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks and get off it immediately. But like the Trenbolones and stuff, never, ever was that a thing I put in my off season.
Now, GH15 unfortunately confused a lot of people into thinking they should use 100 to 300 milligrams of Trenbolone every day. And he didn't make it completely clear that this is not in the off season.
I used to get so mad how people used to do that. It used to drive me nuts.
You can't grow if you do that. You'll look nice. You'll be round. Your muscles will look great, but you're not going to gain 20 pounds in your off season.
No, never. You won't gain anything.
Yes,
nothing.
Exactly. See, because Nick, and by the way, guys, you should go to Nick's Instagram today.
This is before I figured out the science of things when I tell you this. Like, this is pre any knowledge in my mind. I just realized that from trial and error, I am not growing by being a juice head aggressively. Like, this is just the most basic way of explaining it. Like, I'm not growing when I use all this stuff 24/7. I'm not getting the response when I go into prep like I normally do. So I was like, let me just try it this way. And that's literally how I learned it. And then I was like, let me research this. And then, you further your education that way.
Yeah. And we were talking about this actually at the last episode. Look, studies, what many people don't understand is, for example, medical doctors do not understand study design and do not understand statistics. I'm actually going to make a video about this. There's many papers published about how little medical doctors understand even p-values, standard deviations. They don't understand this stuff. Studies, the validity of a study depends on how much it can reflect its external environment. So when you're going to study steroids on a rodent, and this is not very relevant to the real life. The real knowledge comes from people like Nick, who through trial and error figured out what works and what doesn't work. You don't need to go be a scientific bodybuilder. You need to know what works and doesn't work. But from science, we can learn how to protect ourselves sometimes. What we're doing now. But really, you can't learn that much about growing yourself. Except, Nick, I do have one molecule I need to talk to you about later. So next thing, for example, if you're going to get problems with your GI tract or even systemic inflammation, it could be your diet. Number one, your eating window. The bigger your eating window is. So, for example, people used to wake up in the middle of the night, drink a shake, go back to bed. Eventually, this causes dysfunction in your GI tract. You might end up with a big belly. Like some people, when they wake up in the middle of the night, you may end up with that.
Never do that. Never do that.
One of the reasons people have a belly is actually literally inflammation in the area. It'll cause water retention there. So if your GI tract is inflamed, you'll get a belly. That'll actually happen. So if your eating window is wide, the types of foods, you may have foods. Now, don't go do these genetic tests about what kind of food rice is good for me or not. Those are all BS. Those are all BS. I remember my uncles back in Dubai used to tell me, I did the genetic test and I found out that actually rice is not good for me. I swear. You can't know that. I'm looking at all anyway. So don't do that. But you can know through trial and error. There are some SNPs. Like there are some SNPs that are more common, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that are more common among hunter-gatherers and others that came out after the Neolithic expansion that spread agriculture. So for example, some people may be better able to deal with grains than other people, but you basically know through trial and error. Watch your inflammation, look at your C-reactive protein, look at your diet, right? For example, for me, I did the vertical diet once when I was weightlifting with the Stan Efferdings one, and I was eating a lot of white rice, and man, that just destroyed me.
Same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, and then it could be your microbiome. For example, for GI stuff, specifically GI stuff, you may have too little diversity of bacteria. You may have pathological bacteria. Like, let me give you an example of pathological bacteria. H. pylori, H-P-Y-L-O-R-I. Guys, Google that. Go get a test from your doctor. It's a breathing test. You just breathe. You can check. I had
that done.
You've done the test. You never had it.
I had it 2 years ago.
Wow, incredible. Yeah. So it's rare in the US, but in India, for example.
When I was having glucose problems, remember I told you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to go for that test to make sure I didn't have H. pylori. That was like the thing they first tested.
And you had it. And you cured it. Yeah, so
cured
it's easy to cure with a lot of antibiotics. And that thing, by the way, guys.
That was rough, though.
Yeah, a lot of
antibiotics were rough. Yeah. That's funny you brought that up. I totally forgot that happened, actually. Yeah. And the reason I figured out I had that is because of Mel Chansey, because Mel Chansey had it.
Really?
And the reason Mel Chansey figured out he had it is because Jay Cutler had it.
Wow. Yeah.
Because they're very close friends. So then that's when Jay called me and was like, you got to get this test done. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Everybody listening to this, next time you go to your doctor, check for H. pylori. If you
that's God's honest truth. What happened? That was the first sign. I figured out what was going on with my glucose.
Incredible. So this is excellent. Life reflects the science that we're. So by the way, guys, H. pylori is extremely common in some countries. For example, in India, if you visit India and you eat food there, you're going to get H. pylori.
I got it from Mexico.
Yes, that's what I was about. So if you travel and you eat stuff there, yeah.
We went to Mexico. I had it.
My wife wants to go to Tijuana. I was like, I'm not going there. This I don't want to get kidnapped. I don't want to get bacteria. I don't want anything. But anyway.
Yeah, we traced it. We traced it back to that. That was where it's from.
Exactly. That's what would happen next. So for example, my wife's sister, a personal example, my wife's sister just traveled to Malaysia and she came back. She was having GI issues. We asked her to get the test. She had H. pylori. And she's from France. She lives in France. So it was pretty surprising. So in India, if any Indian listeners are listening, you probably have it. Go check it. And what the issue with that is H. pylori makes you far more likely to get stomach cancer. Like unbelievable. It's one of the biggest risk factors. And by the way, why don't I mention something else for you guys to know? If you want to get bacteria in your belly, good bacteria, don't go get fermented pickles or what do they use that sauerkraut? Don't do that stuff.
Sauerkraut.
I love kimchi. I love kimchi. It's my favorite thing. But you don't do that. You know why? Fermented foods are carcinogen. They cause cancers, actually. And particularly kimchi is probably the worst combination because you have capsaicin, the pepper molecule, and which is an irritant for all cells in our body, by the way. That's why it hurts when it comes in and it hurts when it goes out.
Yeah.
You just don't feel the rest, but it's actually causing inflammation everywhere.
That's crazy.
Now, capsaicin has other benefits, but if you combine capsaicin with a fermented food like kimchi, look, when I first read this, I was like suspicious because I was eating kimchi every day. I loved that stuff. It was,
kimchi's good.
Low calorie, you can eat it. It's spicy. It feels like you're active. Feels like you went out. It's so active. So I was loving kimchi. My Korean best friend was sending me kimchi like from all different places and analyzing it. And then I said, okay, if this is really a carcinogen, then South Korea should have a huge amount of stomach cancer. Well, guess what? Number 1 in the world for stomach cancer. South Korea.
Really?
Number 1. And they actually have a great health in general, but stomach cancer, number 1. So don't use that. You can use different probiotics. Your goal, by the way, when you use probiotics, you don't take a probiotic and then stop because immediately a month later, your microbiome goes back to normal. It's actually genetic factors that affect what kind of bacteria you have and the diversity. You want good bacteria and you want a lot of different kinds. You don't want some of these pills that you'll find in CVS and stuff like that. They have like 2 strains, 3 strains in high doses. That's not what you want. You want diversity and you want to keep using it. Unfortunately, these are the most expensive supplements and you need to have them reviewed by a third-party supplement reviewer because often they come dead. So you need to know if they're alive. And
refrigerate the ones refrigerated.
And they come to you refrigerated. They come to you with that thing. So that's about the microbiome. Another thing, for example, I just give you an example from diet affecting atherosclerosis. If your diet is very high in saturated fat, meaning you're eating fatty red meats, you're eating bacon, you're eating, what other
sausages, all that shit.
Well, not just that, but like I don't. For some reason, I'm not thinking of what saturated fats people eat. But anyway, saturated fats in general will, in most people, raise their LDL cholesterol. Now, the carnivores and ketogenic guys will come and tell you this doesn't matter as long as your inflammation is low and as long as your triglycerides are low. I disagree. The consensus in the medical literature disagrees. Actually, there are a couple of consensuses, to be honest with you, like completely. But I really, for me, look, for my life, I'm not letting my LDL cholesterol go above 70.
No.
Okay? If I was a bodybuilder, I would be even more careful because I don't want too many of those particles in my blood because the inflammation will already be high. So your diet, that could be that. It could also be dietary cholesterol, but that affects about like really little in terms of it. I mean, for me, if I eat a bunch of eggs, my cholesterol will go above 100. But for some people, it won't. It depends on some polymorphisms. They're not completely understood. People say it's a genetic factor, it's a small percentage of the population. It's probably you though. Try it. Try 20 eggs a day. Check your LDL cholesterol the next month. I bet you'll find that. Now, there's also cholesterol in liver, but liver has higher percentage of B vitamins and choline than eggs do, in terms of the amount of in terms of the amount of cholesterol. So liver, especially chicken liver. So liver is probably a better source for nutrition for you. And if I was a bodybuilder, I would always be eating a little bit of liver every day. You want your nutrients. If you don't have liver, you're not on your game. Okay, you're not on. No, you don't want to get B vitamin supplements. You want your liver. No. You want that stuff there, even though it has a lot of iron. You still want it. So moving on, especially if you're trying to get as big as you can. If you don't care about your health, eat a lot of liver. Eat 30 grams of liver every day, for sure. For sure. 40 grams of liver every day. No, it's not much. It's like this, like a pill. You can take it, make a liver pate. You can blend. You basically cook the liver. Yeah. Fry the liver, and then take the liver and fry some. Fry the liver, or you can even bake the liver. Fry some onions, saute the onions, and blend it in a blender, and it'll taste great. My wife has a good recipe actually for this. It really tastes not so bad. I hate liver. Have you like liver?
No.
Yeah, it's nasty. Unless you grow up eating it. For our UK listeners, you guys grow up eating liver with onions and stuff. You guys are lucky. I'm gonna make my children eat liver from the beginning, so they just. I gotta force them. I remember my father, man.
On the baby bottle.
Yeah, my father once forced me. I hate okra. Okay, when I was younger. Do you like okra?
I don't know what it is.
Oh, it's the nastiest vegetable. It's like a hairy vegetable that's soft inside and has seeds. So my father, for some reason, it has nothing to do. Okra is not particularly healthy. It's just he was annoyed that I was like not eating it. So when I was like 8 years old, he made me sit. He left the house and he told me, like a dog, you know, he told me, you stay on this table. There was this table where I used to study. He said, you sit there until the plate is finished. If you get up, you know what will happen to you. So then he left the house. I sat there for freaking 3 hours. I trying and throwing up and trying and throwing up and trying. And there wasn't like a Filipina nanny that used to be there because I never had a mother or anything. And my father used to have someone to look over me. So there was this lady there, very nice lady. I'm still close friends with her. And she was like feeling so bad for me. Like, you know, she eventually what she did was she took the okra and threw it away secretly and said he ate it. But after 3 hours I was sitting and it was so difficult. So I'm not going to do that to my kids, obviously. Anyway, so other factors, environment, okay, air pollution. You don't realize, go online, check out the air pollution in Bakersfield. I'm from California. I live in Southern California. I wanted to move to Bakersfield because it's cheap and because it's conservative. Then I looked at the air pollution. I was like, oh my God, this is going to affect my health. It's really bad. Oh my God, Bakersfield is horrible. California is in general very bad.
Yeah, very bad. Yeah.
I don't know how. I think it's almost as bad as New York City, to be honest. I don't know.
It's got to be. It has to be.
It's really bad.
There's nothing but industrial parks here, you know?
Yeah. So you mean in
factories? Yeah, and factories and everything. Yeah.
So there's air pollution. And then, for example, in London, have you ever been to London, Nick?
No, I haven't been to London.
So in London, if you take the tube in London, which is the subway, which I used to take all the time, you'll start to notice, anyone listeners, please comment below if you've been in London, this happened to you. You'll start to notice your mucus in your nose, which is disgusting. I know, but let me tell you, your mucus in your nose will turn freaking black. You take the tube every day, which you know everybody does in London. I mean, unless you're
that's what they use,
unless you're very rich, you have a car or you can afford taxis or something. Well, I would take the tube every day. And when you take the tube, the mucus is actually black. That's because you're inhaling a lot of smog, a lot of things that
the subway has to be like that in New York too, though.
Is the subway in New York like good
disgusting,
now?
Disgusting.
I heard it was very bad.
Me and Chelsea were just actually talking about how bad it is. Like we're talking about like, how is it even possible that it's that bad still?
Really? Huh?
It's horrible. It's not even like, okay, it's horrible.
So
like it's ghetto. Yeah, there's literally no security. There's no one watching over you. There's the intense smell when you go down there from the fumes of everything. Like it's not a good atmosphere at all in any degree, you know? So I just saw that they're doing away with Metro cards on the news and they're making it all on your cell phone now or a major credit card. So you have to use that to get onto the Metro system now. So they're doing away with it probably because they can track you better, but we're talking about how like there's no security, there's no gate even up like by the subway rail. There's people always falling, getting pushed. That happens all the time. Like every week there's someone else getting pushed onto the tracks. And there's no security there. So you can literally like, you know, blow up the place if you want, you know?
Wow.
And you're right underneath the whole entire city. It's like, it's a perfect spot for a terrorist to go.
Yeah, in the early 90's, there used to be a bunch of stabbings in the subways. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. And there's
Bloods,
homeless
when they
people
first
everywhere
started-
down. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bloods, when they first started in New York City, they used to have an initiation ceremony where they'd have people go randomly slash random people. And they were doing it in the subways. I don't know.
There's nothing down. There's no cameras or anything. Nothing. Zero.
Crazy. No, in London, thankfully, London is the safest city I've ever been in. There's a camera every freaking where. You don't have to work.
Yes. That's how it should be.
Although I know a woman who had her purse stolen once, which is shocking. But like basically nothing ever happens there. It's really good. But speaking of tracking us, do you think one day there's going to be no more cash? There's just going to be bank cards, and they're going to know.
You know how you've been to China, haven't you, or no?
No, thank God. I refuse from my whole life.
You know China, like there is no cash, right? You know that, right?
No way. I didn't know
everything is cell phone.
Wow. Oh, wow.
It's a cashless society already. It's been like that.
Okay.
I had a good friend that I used to be friends with, and I would go over there with him, and they use their cell phone for everything. Their homes, their cars, their payments, everything is done through cell phones. Like everything. Like there is no cash. Like you bring out cash, you're poor. Like you're like, what are you doing? Wow. They look at you like you're crazy. But tips, everything.
Really? Huh?
Everything is cell phone. Yeah. It's like the Apple Wallet, but like next level. You know, they have their own software for it.
Yeah, they have their own software for everything. That's the interesting part. Whereas we
infrared cameras everywhere. They did this. There's a study I could show you. It was from Nat Geo. It's actually really good about how good the security system is in China. They did a test. They let a guy run and go with a cell phone for like hours, and they tracked him down in 5 minutes from the camera systems, from the facial software. Amazing. Anywhere he could go, anywhere in the city, and they found him in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, let me comment on something from a historical perspective that maybe our audience doesn't know. When they think about the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, they think of communism. It's not actually communism. It's Nazism. And I'll tell you why. What is a Nazi? It's a national. What is the actual acronym? It's Nationalist Socialist. And China is not communist. There are billionaires in the Communist Party, not communist. It's right. There are people that are billionaires, so you cannot call it communist. It's socialist, and it is nationalist. Like, look what they're doing with the seas right now. They're trying to take Tibet. They're trying to take even the Philippines. They're taking some of the seas. They're literally doing exactly what the Nazis did. They're spreading and taking over land, which is shocking to do in the 21st century. You would think that it wouldn't be possible, but it is. So anyway, let's continue. So basically, I consider China a Nazi country. Actually, that's the way I. But no offense to any people. I really, that's what it is classically. It's nationalist, socialist, which is why China is not going backwards. If it was just socialist, like the UK or something, their economy wouldn't be booming. But because of the nationalism, everyone is sacrificing for each other for the sake of the country. So, and then they actually have sort of capitalism also. So it's pretty interesting. It's basically a controlled economy. Anyway, so continuing on. So we're talking about environmental factors. Another one I want to mention is radiation. You guys may not know. Where you live really affects the amount of radiation you get, and that affects how your body functions. So, for example, when you get radiation, some kinds of radiation, you can get DNA damage, and your body recognizes that and may also release inflammatory cytokines to try to protect you from that, which doesn't work.
So 5G is real?
So I made a post about that. This is very interesting you bring that up. I made a post yesterday because someone sent me a message, and I was like, I should mention this because it's a very controversial subject, and people don't realize when they talk about this 5G thing. I don't think that the people should be that deathly afraid of it at all. But I want to make something clear to the audience that think that is a conspiracy theory. Scientists never knew whether cell phones would cause brain tumors. They never knew. The first 20 years of cell phones, people were wondering. There were scientific studies to figure out, is there an increased rate of brain cancers? Is there not? Are these waves healthy or not? We don't know. So it's still up for debate.
Right.
And what's funny is when I made this post of the study, just put a study there. Some guy immediately sent me a message. He said, I want to alert your attention. And he's a good subscriber, actually. He's a PhD student from the University of Liverpool, which is not a good university, but he's a PhD student there. And he's studying in Japan at they have programs where you can study under another academic at supposedly a good university called Reiki. I don't know. The reason why we had a discussion about this after, we had a little argument. So basically, this nice subscriber who's messaged me before telling me that he specializes in Alzheimer's disease. So he's a neuroscientist, PhD student, neuroscience, and he's studying specifically something called amyloid precursor protein, APP, which produces the amyloid plaques, which are one of the two major pathologies that cause Alzheimer's disease. So when I talked to him originally, I said, oh, you're studying APP. Why don't you come on the podcast? Tell us a little bit about it. And I asked him some questions because, as you guys know, I like cognitive enhancement. And how can you study that? You need to study also the diseases of the brain. So I also read a lot about APP and about, not specifically about APP, but about Alzheimer's disease. And when I originally talked to him, I realized he didn't know much about it. He was too specialized. That's the problem with academics, is they're often very specialized, so they don't know much else, even about Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
He knows about APP a little bit. So I discovered that early on. But anyway, he sends me a message yesterday night. He says, I wanted to alert you to the fact that the person who wrote this study on 5G is he didn't say he's not he said he's an aerospace engineer. So I was like, what does that have to do with anything? So he said, well, I just didn't want you to mislead your audience. You should maybe include a disclaimer. Well, first of all, I was like, I didn't tell him in detail, but first of all, guys, go to my Instagram. You'll see I highlighted the post. I'm not standing behind that paper. I didn't write anything on the paper. I just put the paper there for you guys to go read it and then see who cited it on Google Scholar and then read about the information, read about the
educate
about it from peer-reviewed academic papers. Now, I am a person without a PhD. If I publish a paper that gets into a peer-reviewed academic journal, it's accepted. That means people have reviewed it. It is accepted. Now, I will tell the audience that don't know, there are levels of academic journals. There are some crappy ones. There are some good ones. This one wasn't an amazing one. It was a journal of toxicology. But there are, for example, there are some very, very famous ones. Like, we won't get into too much into the details of it. But the point is, there are different levels. But either way, if it's in a peer-reviewed one and it's not called like nutrition and alternative medicine or something like that, then it's probably an okay paper. You can probably trust it as long as you look through it, read the study design, read the opinion, and try to understand. Don't go to what I call calls to authority. That's what people do. Like, for example, we have a doctor on YouTube called, who's that doctor that has millions of subscribers, but he's not a doctor? Alex something. He's a chiropractor, but he calls himself doctor. Whenever you see a guy that writes the name doctor in front of his name, be careful. He's making you a call to authority, like Dr. Lane Norton, for example. That's a call to authority. Lane Norton usually doesn't do that. He calls himself BioLane. He usually doesn't do that. He's pretty okay with that. For example, Daniel Kahneman, who I know personally, Nobel Prize winner, will never write on a book, Dr. Daniel Kahneman. He may write, which he doesn't, PhD. But they would never call himself doctor before the name. So when you do a call to authority, he's an aerospace engineer. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Why don't you just read the material and think for yourself? Yeah. Don't just say, oh, credibility. You lose credibility. You have credibility. He's a doctor. You're not a doctor. Let's not get into that so much because you have a lot of, I don't want to get into too much.
You have to be able to investigate whatever you're reading too, though. That's your responsibility. Yeah, and think.
Exactly. And back to the important point is the guy missed the point. The lead author was an aerospace engineer. There were 4 authors. There were 4 authors with PhDs. And second of all, why would someone with aerospace engineering not be able to think about radio? What does that have to do with it? And finally, this guy that was talking is a neuroscience PhD that doesn't even understand Alzheimer's disease. Forget about getting into radio waves. So the point is, we don't need to get into that kind of stuff. And then at the end, what I told him is, listen, you go to the University of Liverpool, which is a piece of crap university, which means you couldn't get into a better university. I got into UCL, which is in London, neuroscience PhD. I got in. I never talk about this. I got into many PhD programs. One of them is the best one in the UK. It's called University College of London, neuroscience PhD, which I am sure he didn't get into. Otherwise, he would not go to Liverpool.
He would be there.
But I don't talk about that because I don't try to do calls to credibility. I sometimes mention, like when your friend asked, I say I have degrees in this and that, but I don't try to do that because you should try to, and never take my word for it. Go check out the papers that I cite. Go read stuff. Figure it out for yourself. So the point is, radiation is really bad. People don't realize, for example, you lived in California. You probably heard of Beverly Hills High School, where the rich kids go to. Yeah. Beverly Hills High School had a crazy amount of cancers in the early 2000s or the 90s. because of the fact that the school was built on some kind of oil well or something like that. And they had environmental toxins that were causing people to get So you can check out the air in your area. You can check out the radiation. All this stuff is online. The city that you live in depends on it.
Well, every morning in California, you have that smog that's to burn off every day.
Yes, so yeah,
every day.
Dubai has that really bad now as well. Really
right. Bad. Oh, really? So Dubai does too?
Really bad. It's very bad now. So now we get into strategy. What do you do as a bodybuilder to not allow these inflammatory cytokines to destroy your body? First of all, and just to be clear, why would it happen to a bodybuilder? Mainly because you're eating all the time, your digestive tract is messed up, you're taking steroids, your androgen signaling is up, your sympathetic nervous drive is up. That's why sometimes you get anxious, either because of the cytokines or just because you have adrenaline signaling all the time. So basically, steroids make you in a fight or flight response generally. So what would you do? Number one, what you can do is you can reduce the dominance of this fight or flight system. You can do this through a variety of ways. For example, you can block adrenaline. So you can mess with that fight or flight system. You block adrenaline, the adrenaline is not working properly. Beta blockade, which is something I introduced to bodybuilding also, for example. Or you could do mindfulness meditation like your friend does, which is not working on him. Or you could take SSRIs. For example, SSRIs reduce the fight or flight state in your brain because they increase serotonin, which is why, by the way, serotonin is specifically what makes humans less hostile. As you can see, I'm naturally an aggressive person. One of the reasons I take SSRIs also to reduce that, right? So you can do that. Or you can take some molecules in supplements. For example, you guys have heard from Rhonda Patrick, who popularized sulforaphane from broccoli sprouts, or from the supplement from France called Prostaphane. Okay, you can Google that. Or milk thistle. Milk thistle does the same thing, changes gene transcription. How does milk thistle protect your liver?
Do you respect milk thistle?
It changes gene transcription. It's not very powerful, but it does do that. And that's how it protects the kidneys. It's not actually a free radical scavenger. It changes how your body functions. Or for example, other than milk thistle, for example, or how thistle, whatever it is, turmeric does the same thing, changes gene transcription in your body. It turns you away from the NF-kappa B pro-inflammatory gene transcription, okay? Or for example, moringa from the moringa plant. Moringa is very similar to sulforaphane. Most of my clients use both of them. These are hormetic factors. These are things that stress your body and change your body's system. So it goes away from this inflammatory system towards a healing system, okay? So that's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do, I should mention one thing, EPA. EPA from fish oil. The major way that EPA reduced heart attacks in the Reduce It trial when taken 4 grams a day, I think, is by lowering inflammation. It's also the reason that although Rhonda Patrick tells you need DHA for your brain, fish oil has EPA and DHA. DHA is there's a lot of DHA in the brain. So scientists think that you need to take a lot of DHA for your brain. This is not really true. There's no evidence of this. There's no evidence that taking DHA helps you in any kind of way. But there is evidence that taking EPA reduces anxiety and depression in controlled human placebo-controlled studies when you take it at a high dose. So most of my clients take very high doses of fish oil, of EPA and DHA to reduce that inflammatory response. It changes gene transcription in the body through various mechanisms, which we don't fully understand. Sauna, for example, does the same thing. People who use the sauna get less neurodegenerative diseases, but probably because of brain neurotrophic factors. But
what type of sauna are you talking about?
Finnish sauna, 175 degree Fahrenheit, at least 20 minutes, at least 4
Did you like that? Did you like that infrared one I bought?
I don't. The studies on the infrared ones,
the red light.
There's no studies backing that. Basically, there's no studies backing it up. We need to build if we move to the same place, which we should do. We should build a real Finnish sauna in between our houses. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I really
100%.
Yeah, because it's really changes your lifestyle. I mean, the sauna helped me feel better than going to than cardiovascular exercise. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
So if your infrared sauna is hot enough, it'll probably do it, but we don't know for sure. So I don't take risks. The next thing is actual drugs that modulate the inflammatory system. So what do they do for people that have colitis or Crohn's disease? They give them things like tumor necrosis factor alpha blockers, just like a beta blocker. It blocks the inflammatory cytokine from working. Problem is, they also give this to people with arthritis. They give this to I assume Chris Bumstead is on one of these to protect his kidney. That's the only way it'll work.
He would have to be, right?
It would have to be. But the problem is these things increase the rates of cancer, whereas EPA doesn't, sulforaphane doesn't, moringa doesn't.
When you say increase the rates of cancer by a lot?
Yeah, by like 5% or something like that. I can't remember.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, very
significant.
Wow. Very concerning, because they block your body's defense system against cancers. Your body can't sense the cancers and attack it. So finally, you can reduce the actual oxidative stress in your body. Well, not finally. There's one more. Fuck, this was long. But anyway, you guys complaining about informational content, you got it this time, okay? So this was like a how-to. This can change your life, okay? So you can also reduce the oxidative stress in your body directly with free radical scavengers like vitamin C, vitamin E. These things actually scavenge free radicals. However, if you take too much of these things, they can actually harm sometimes your body. So for example, if you inject glutathione in your veins, it'll quickly be transported through your body, IV glutathione. But if you inject glutathione into your muscle, it's so potent of a free radical scavenger that it could damage the cells at that location, which is why, for example, IV glutathione is much superior to IM glutathione. But if you don't care about damaging those, if, for example, you're a bodybuilder, probably it's better than not doing it. Or you could upregulate your body's natural system, glutathione, for example, as your liver's primary antioxidant in the antioxidant defense system. How can you do that? For example, combine NAC. NAC donates a cysteine for the synthesis of glutathione with glycine. Glycine is also used in the synthesis of glutathione. Glycine is the reason, by the way, carnivores eat the skin off the chickens and things like that. So there you go, guys, with and then you can change your lifestyle. Move away, obviously, from cities with the pollution and stuff like that. Or, for example, get an air purifier that's HEPA. When I was in college, I used to still smoke cigarettes. So what I did was I hated secondhand smoke, and I didn't want to smoke outside in Pittsburgh. It's freezing. So what I used to do, and I was always studying, and I was studying and chain smoking. So what I did was I bought 4 industrial size Honeywell. They don't produce them anymore. They're huge. HEPA antibacterial air purifiers that were high power. My electricity bill was crazy, but they were across my apartment. I used to smoke a cigarette, the smoke would disappear immediately. And it wasn't even near me. Disappear immediately. And my apartment smelled beautiful. There was no dust in the air. It would take in everything, kill all these microorganisms in the air. You know, you can do that, for example, for your environment as well.
Do you believe that any of them out there right now are any good?
Yeah. You just need a big enough one. They're
expensive.
HEPA. Yeah, they are expensive, but if you do that for your house,
they really make a big difference.
Yes. You'll clean your air. You'll have less bacteria that you're inhaling. It'll make a huge difference in your life. You'll feel it.
So you don't think the filters on air conditioning systems do anything?
Oh no, very little. They're just filtering big dust particles, but this is microorganisms, and you have to keep cleaning it. Like you have different kinds of carbon filters.
Yeah, there's levels to it. Yeah.
You should definitely get them for your fiance. I think it would be great for her because she might be sensitive to those kind of things, the air and stuff like that.
We have so much. This house is brand new, but for some reason the dust is it's wild.
Oh,
it's crazy.
I'll some links to some that you should buy them.
Yeah. I didn't know if they're actually, you got to find I didn't know which ones actually make sense.
I was going to do a second academic thing about fertility for men. I have, by the way, the best male fertility protocol. It's incomparable. It's already been copied by other people. And I didn't make it up. I found it in the literature, but bodybuilders don't know about it. But I can't talk about it. I talk too much in this one. So we'll do it on the next one. The next one, we'll do a fertility for men. And I'll tell you guys exactly how and I didn't use this for myself recently, but exactly how you can get your semen parameters and your sperm parameters working very well, very quickly, efficiently. And I'll tell you exactly why the other protocols are worse than mine. So now Nick has to talk to us and tell us about synthol.
Yeah.
But briefly, before we do, can you tell us, do you agree that leg training, you should always use 20 to 25 reps? It makes,
So leg training is difficult to kind of say who should do high intensity, who should do low intensity, who should do supersets, who should do volume, who should do heavyweight. I really stand on the fact that if like you're an athlete let's say you're growing up as an athlete, like I was track and field, I played basketball, I did cross country. I was an endurance athlete, but I had a lot of fast twitch muscle fibers because I was a sprinter. I had very good explosiveness. I think you got to really analyze the person when it comes to leg training, particularly. Upper body's pretty easy, to be honest with you. Everyone's pretty much similar, but legs is a different territory because of athletic background. I think also how you were training as you were coming up. Were you an athlete at all? What sports were you playing? What were your strengths? What were your weaknesses? And I really look at, what they've been doing prior to at this point. So if the person's been doing, let's say, high volume with heavy weight and are not getting the response that they should have, I would really start to investigate what they were doing as an athlete as they were younger. If they were an athlete, were they explosive? Were they a long distance runner? Were they not doing any sports? Were they a quarterback? Were they a kicker? There's just so much information there for them to look at, to evaluate in order to kind of project onto their training as they get older. Because what I realized, because I was a sprinter, I had big legs already to begin with. Like I was very leg dominant as a bodybuilder going into bodybuilding. So I realized that the heavy ass weight was killing my joints because naturally I had very small joints to begin with. So I realized right away that the heavy weight was not a benefit for me. I was going to probably shorten my career by half if I kept doing what I was trying to do as a kid. Then I realized that the low reps were not doing anything for me except for getting me stronger, which my legs weren't growing. They were just getting stronger. Okay. And that was something I realized right away. So when I went into the higher volume, moderate weight, obviously you still have to lift decent weight. You can't be doing lightweight, but it was challenging enough to the fact that I could get 15, 20, 30 reps, 40 reps, 50 reps. I was like really pushing lactic acid to another level at that point. Then I was getting muscle response and I was getting less joint pain. And I noticed, just looking at my body, I had very small joints for a 6 foot, bodybuilder, and I had pretty good muscle bellies. I had round muscle bellies. But the lower body was not responding similar to what I was doing for my upper body. Upper body, I needed to really kill myself. I had to push weight pretty heavy. I had to do moderate reps, nothing high to get the response upper body, but my lower body was much different. And I realized for my body type, that was what was going to work in the long run, especially for my joints, tendons, ligaments. I never had any type of serious injury, squatting or deadlifting or leg pressing. And I felt good when I went to the gym. I didn't feel like I was putting myself through pain and agony. I was just getting a good workout. I was getting better pumps. There was more blood flow. And I was getting the muscle response I wanted. I see a lot of kids make the mistake, though, that they go in there and think that 700 pounds on the squat bar is going to make their legs bigger. And theoretically, their form is off. Like they're starting from basics. Their form is getting shitty. Their mechanics are bad. They're using knee wraps, belts, fucking straps, and they're still in pain doing the squats. So that immediately tells me maybe their joints are not able to handle the load. Maybe their tendon ligaments haven't caught up yet. Maybe they're pushing drugs too early. There's a lot of outside variables you have to consider too, but I think the main thing is pay attention. Like, are you getting the pumps that you need to? Because that's priority as a bodybuilder. Are you getting the blood flow? Are you getting the good muscle response that you want? Or are you just getting stronger? Like getting stronger, I think, is a really bad tool to use to say, oh, I'm getting better as a bodybuilder. I know everybody wants to do this progressive overload, but the progressive overload just essentially means that you have to just keep pushing yourself, not I have to increase weight. Weight for me in bodybuilding is kind of irrelevant. I never, ever wrote down my lifts when I was training. Like I didn't have a logbook to tell me what I lifted. I had a logbook to make sure that I was doing the same lifts every week and making sure I was hitting the same exercises for like what me and Ben and you talked about as far as train the neuro system. I wanted to make sure I was doing the same thing for weeks upon weeks so that I was perfecting that exercise. That was more so my focus than anything, not, oh, did I do 130 on this or did I do 140? I really didn't care about my weights, but I really think that you have to really analyze what type of athlete you are as a person going into the gym. Maybe you have no athletic background. This is all new to you. So you kind of got to test the waters, but I never got the response that I wanted to from going extremely heavy with legs, quads, hamstrings, calves, nothing. I never got the response I wanted to. I got the response when I would just literally beat the shit out of my legs. Because remember, also, if you're doing manual labor all day long and you're on your legs all day long, you're going to really, really have to adjust your rest and recovery, your frequency of training, how long your workouts are. You got to really prioritize these things, because if you're like a carpenter or a laborer or whatever, it's gonna be very hard for you to push your legs to like a pro bodybuilder level. I've seen guys do it, don't get me wrong, but that's always been a very big thing to hold people back as far as their jobs and careers go as well. Because what I noticed was the less output I was doing per day for my leg development, like just literally just keeping my legs up as much as possible, was key. And I learned that very young because I was a bouncer. And when I was bouncing like 6-7 days a week and I was standing for 8-10 hours a day just on my feet, my legs were not developing as fast as it was when I was just sitting on my ass doing absolutely nothing. And I know not everyone has the luxury of doing that, but like we we're talking about before, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system really has a big role in recovery, and especially with your legs. Upper body kind of is, honestly, if you can't master your upper body, I really can't help you there, because like upper body is pretty easy to get a response out of. But when you have very good legs, you're doing something right and you're doing everything right. I think that's what really the big difference is to separate the people.
So there's a guy who had amazing legs in the 70s. What's his name? That the best
Platz.
So Platz, if anyone watches him, he always does very high.
He's also very short though.
Yeah, I know, but he does very high repetitions, right?
Right.
Obviously that's an N of one, but I wanted to mention something. I have never in my life trained for hypertrophy. I hired the dog crap, Dante Trudel, once to figure out just what they were doing. And I tried it for like 3-4 weeks and then I stopped but the point is, I never trained for it, but because I was training for strength, I was noticing, for example, in high school, I had a very funny friend. That's how I came up with the name for Lucas Oxidative. I had a very funny friend who started calling me Gluteus Maximus because I used to squat a lot, and so within a year of starting Westside Barbell, I was squatting 405 at the age of 17. And
now you were very focused on like mechanics and form too. Yeah,
but I was trying. We didn't have anyone in Dubai, that knew. But I was like online reading Louis Simmons and trying my best. Before this stuff got popular. This was in like 2000.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there wasn't information out there.
2004. So the point is, what I noticed though was when I started adding this thing called a Widowmaker set, which is a 20 rep squat set where you breathe in between.
Yeah.
I didn't want my legs to grow because it was very annoying when you walk and your legs. I hate that crap.
Well, the chafing is the worst.
They started growing a lot, so I stopped. I stopped the 20 rep sets because I didn't want them to. So I've noticed also like 70% of the people I know, if they get their legs moderately strong, like not 700 pounds squat, but like 405 or something like that, at that point, once they start doing 20 to 25 repetitions, they seem to grow more. I think the reason is because our legs are meant to have, just like our calves and forearms are meant to be often. The people with the biggest forearms are like mechanics, people like that, because they're constantly doing stuff. And that's why like even walking uphill on a treadmill will help your calves sometimes more than lifting. You can see these people lifting like 400 pounds with a calf raise and their
doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything. Because
it doesn't respond to that. So
it's very annoying when I see guys that are so focused on honestly, the thing that I really want to, what am I trying to say? Focus on what Ben was talking about was training a neurosystem and actually training your mechanics. Because when I was such a perfectionist when it came to lifting, like everyone was like, dude, how does your squat form? And I'm not bragging. I literally mean it. Like,
yeah, for sure.
My squats were perfect and the load was perfectly on my quads. It was dispersed evenly in my glutes, my hips, my hams, and everything was firing when I would get in the hole. I wasn't just doing this repetitions. Like my squat was perfect. So the load was where it needed to be. It wasn't a bounce, same thing with everyone lifts. They get momentum and they lift. Momentum lifting is not bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is using the muscle to lift the weights. And I think so many people are so focused on, I got to put 10 pounds on. I got to put 15 pounds. I got to put another 25. And that is not going to get your legs bigger at all. Like it's really not. And that goes with deadlift, any lift in the gym, any machine, you have to focus on the mechanics. And I guarantee you, if you really perfect that, like it's gonna be like instinct. You're just gonna be able to do it and everything's gonna fire. And that's how the weight goes up eventually.
So there's a little bit of confusion going on. So what your friend was saying was taken from the Bulgarian training in Westside Barbell, right, which is that, for example, in Westside Barbell training, you have a day that's called dynamic effort day, in which you're doing a very light weight on your bench and your squat, not your deadlift, and you're doing the repetition as fast as you can. And that is supposed to train your neural programming. In the Bulgarian style, you just do basically squat every day. There's also Dr. Squat who does this squatting every day thing. There's a bunch of people like that. Once your basically your peripheral nerves are firing correctly in that movement, then you know the movement. Then I think the next stage is to get a little bit strong. And then the next stage is to do what Nick is saying, which is to learn to feel it. Because if you don't feel it in the right area, I believe, I've never trained for hypertrophy. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I think that if you feel it in the right area, that's when it grows. Because like, for example, like I might be squatting and mine might be mostly glute and lower hams.
Right.
Someone else might be squatting like Mike Francois, mostly doing quads or front squat to get the quads going. So you need to feel it if you're not feeling, but you need to be a bit strong, otherwise you won't get big. And the second question people asked last week was synthol. They wanted to know, and I have no idea. There's no academic research on this, and I really don't know. I've never tried. I've never done a site injection. And you are really one of the experts on this stuff, doing it perfectly. Other people don't do it very well. First of all, I want to ask you, who did synthol the worst in terms of both how it looked on stage and how it looked after they got skinny? Marcus Rule, Flex Wheeler after they got skinny, I guess. Right. So
there was another guy, another black gentleman that, God, what was his name? I'll figure his name. He did his arms and his delts really bad. And he was actually placing at the Olympia with it. And I'll just send you his name. He looked really bad. He's actually a really good bodybuilder before it too. Like he had an exceptional body, like beautiful, and he ruined it with synthol. But I'll find his picture. You'll be like, what the fuck? But I mean, listen, this is the God's honest truth, and I would never make this up. The 90's bodybuilders were literally built 100%. On site enhancement drugs, not just synthol. I mean, escalene. Okay, there was that was actually used for surgeries to transport blood to different areas of the body. It was like, I think for babies or something like that, fetuses, when people got pregnant, I think, or something like that. Nolotol was like the new USA version of it. But escalene was discontinued because they realized it was actually pretty dangerous to use. There was some harsh chemicals in it, whatnot. Then Nolotol was the new one, which is actually still available to this day, which I did use during my career as well. I used both of them. I used escalene and Nolotol. There is nothing that's ever been able to copy what escalene used to do. As far as, I'm going to just decide real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
What were you going to say?
I was going to ask, what does it feel like? What does it look like when you do escalene and compared to?
So escalene, the difference between escalene and Nolotol was that escalene worked on everybody's muscle. Okay. You didn't have to have the right muscle for it. For some reason, Nolotol, if somebody, let's say you and me use it in the same exact place for the same amount, you would sometimes get a weird little welt from it. It would bubble up. It would deform the muscle. It wouldn't absorb as well. Escalene, you could shoot into anyone's muscles. And as long as they had some muscle there, like some muscle tissue, it would work. It would inflame the muscle perfectly and would round it out. It wouldn't give it like some weird triangles or like bumps and stuff. You know, Nolotol didn't always work right. You had to have the right muscle for it.
No right angles, no like perfect.
Yeah, no, they had no triangles, no geometric figures, you know, so
no geometry.
escalene, you could literally just pump it with as much as you want and it would just get rounder and rounder and rounder. That's literally what these bodybuilders did. They wouldn't even like, that's why Kevin Levrone prepped for 6 months of the year, because he knew his last 3 months of prep, he could literally build his arms, his chest, all those small muscle groups with that.
Go around and his triceps.
It looked fake almost. You're like, damn, how does a muscle get that inflamed looking? So what they would do for prep, and this is coming from the horse's mouth. I'm not gonna say names. This is coming from the horse's mouth. Yeah. All of them. They would deplete themselves so hard for shows. They wouldn't even carb up for shows because they knew they could do that before stage, loading for the stage, and be dry, depleted, hard, grainy, and inject this, and they wouldn't lose any separation. That was another thing with Nolotol. You would blur the lines of muscles. You would lose the detail, the striations, the fibers. For some reason, escalene did not do that to the muscle fibers. So that was like a very big weapon they had in their arsenal when it came to stage time. So like you look at the Grand Prix, like some of the Grand Prix shows, the videos, they walk out, everyone's like, oh, it's the lighting. Motherfucker, they lived on it. Like they would shoot their entire body with it. You know what I mean? Everyone thought Flex Lewis, Flex Lewis, I didn't mean to throw you in there. They think Flex Wheeler had calf implants. Like, no, he had escaline rammed up his calves and they told him, don't do that again. Look bad. That's literally what they told him. People think he got surgery to cut his calves out. Like, no, that never happened, guys. Like, it was escaline in his calves because his calves were just like double the size one year as they were. Everyone made a big deal about it. But that was like a huge trick back then. And that literally was what created bodybuilding. And there really wasn't anyone that wasn't using it at the time. Like they were all using it, even the Ronnies, you know,
so dry and full. It was inflammation.
They didn't have to worry about the carb up. They had that as an arsenal, you know, and this is coming from all of them. They all used it. So you notice some of the shows, the bodybuilders don't look the same like at all because at that time, sometimes they had a hard time getting it. They didn't have enough of it. It was very expensive as well. It was $100 a shot. So like they would spend, you know, thousands on this just for a show. So the big difference between the nolotols and the escalines, and then you have synthols, because synthol is very oil driven base. It's got a bunch of chemicals as well. I'm not sure exactly all of them because they all make them do it different, but that help protein synthesis, that help the breaking down of actually nutrients. They help feed more nutrients to the muscles. So they do actually help them grow in some sense. It's not just cottonseed oil, you know what I mean? Or canola oil or olive oil that you're injecting. Some people go buy grapeseed oil and they shoot it thinking it's synthol. And that's what those kids like in Russia do. Yeah. It doesn't break down or absorb or anything. So then they get infections and whatnot. You guys see the outcome of that. So don't do that. Like real synthols, like painless pumps was one of the good ones when I first came up in the 2000s that I was using. That actually had some good stuff in it where you're like, okay, I can understand using higher amounts of this because they will break down. There's nothing harsh in it, you know, as we know of. So that was safe with that. But the nolotols and escaline had a water base. So that's why they were so good. They were in and out of your system quick. So they would absorb, they would inflame, they would last maybe 24, 48 hours and then go away. It was never, there wasn't an inflammatory response for weeks like synthol does, where it's actually, you know, attaching to the fiber, capsulating a little bit, restricting blood flow. Yeah. And that was harsh. That was actually harming you in the long run because what happens was, people went overboard with the synthol, and that's where it became, I think, where it was good and then it was bad because when you overdo the synthol, that's when it restricts blood flow. It really causes atrophy to the muscle sometimes. It doesn't help muscle growth.
The question was, by the way, about restricting blood flow. That's exactly what
and eventually you can use. Now, listen, guys, I'm all about using synthol, but in the right way with the right amount. If for the right muscle group, because you can't be injecting big muscle groups with it. Let's be honest. It's never going to flow right. It never looks right. The muscle's too big. Like your smaller muscle groups, your biceps, triceps, traps, maybe Terry's muscles. If you want to go crazy, you know, like those little muscles that you can mess around with it. But if you try to go do your quad sweep or your hamstring, it's not going to end up well. I think people are crazy to do that, to really mess up their lines.
What do you think Ashkelani did to his hamstrings and Brandon? I mean, but those hamstrings were very not on stage, but like in the pre-pictures.
They were suspect.
Yeah, very weird. They're like balls of just, and they're
so. If you listen to now, this is not, you know, I'm not pointing out Rami, and I feel bad, but if you noticed, what.
We love Rami, yeah.
Yeah, it just, I mean, Chad touched on it. He talked about the Graston and how they had to really break up stuff in his quads. And that's because it was probably a combination of a number of things they were putting in his quads. If you notice, it's like the first year he actually had feathering. And he actually, this is actually funny because I had the same problem he had. I'm not comparing myself to Rami, guys. I'm just talking about negative things. I'm actually talking about something negative that happened to me. Yeah. He had these two little dents on his quads where they feathered. So to me, that's probably a spot where they were consistently shooting across the, like, because you usually shoot around, you literally follow your IT band on the side of your quads and follow that. And you shoot like every inch or 2 inches. You do like 8-10 injections up your quad to build out a sweep. Like if you look at Dennis Wolf's end of his career, his sweeps were like they literally went like.
Yes, I remember.
He didn't have that in the beginning. He never had that until the end, where his sweeps were just like, they looked almost like like gravity was taking over his sweeps. Now, listen, I don't know if Dennis Wolf was doing it because I don't have inside information, but I know they were doing a lot of this in Kuwait. So when you start breaking up that tissue, I had the same problem in my biceps. I got this dent from where there was too much scar tissue built up. and it happened on both of my biceps because I was shooting them in the same spot. I would get my arm and I would shoot in 4 spots every time. So four different spots on the outside of my bicep, inside and out.
Shoot too.
What?
That seems like the right spots to shoot, though.
Yeah, but after time, but just after time, the scar tissue. So when I would go get a Graston done, I got this dent because of all the scar tissue buildup. And I don't want to call it like damaged tissue. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's almost like there's nerve damage. You almost can't flex it. So like the same thing happened to this bicep. And it looks like it happened to both of his quads where there's feathering and there's like this weird dent and then there's feathering again. It happened literally on the same side. He never had that before. He never even had that dent there. So it looks like they broke it up and eventually they got the fascia pushing against the skin more. So now the feathering came out, but there's a little damage there done from, scar tissue, whatever it is. But I like synthol, but you have to do it safely and correctly. If not, if you overdo it, like I would never suggest doing it in the off season. There's no reason. You're not going to grow from it. It's something that you want to do to fine tune a physique before you go on stage. People do it for photo shoots. They would do it for clubs. They do it for all stupid things, but I would use it. Yeah, right. I would use it to bring up small muscle groups to maybe if they're not as full as other muscle groups, or maybe they're a little lagging behind. It's never going to fix a torn muscle. Don't think because you tore your bicep and now there's this gap and you can refill it with oil, guys. That's impossible. There's no muscle belly there anymore. So there's nothing to absorb. You're not going to build Legos of synthol. Like people literally think they're going to fill that whole void with oil. They do. Like I get that question all the time. Hey, bro, I tore my pec. Can I fill this up with synthol? Like, dude, there's no muscle there anymore. It's torn. Like it's gone, So when you're doing the synthol,